There is an optimism in Brussels for resolving the dispute between Skopje and Sofia before the summer holidays. How real is this?
Well, yeah, we noted that German State Minister Michael Roth went out in public with expressing some optimism. There allegedly is some movement. We've seen some travel activities to Sofia and some conciliatory messages from politicians, from officials in Sofia. However, I have to admit that I'm not really clear what this optimism might be based on, given the fact that we only have a caretaker government in Macedonia, in Bulgaria. Coalition talks failed, the caretaker government is the one that was blocking North Macedonia's opening of the EU's opening of accession talks with North Macedonia. So I really doubt that the caretaker government will do what it hasn't done as it was when it was still in full mandate, and when Bulgaria obviously will face new elections, and this is a hot topic. So I have to say I cannot share this optimism because I've not seen any evidence that would underpin this optimism. And in addition to, I mean, if the optimism stems from what we've heard as some proposed so-called solutions to the deadlock, these proposals on basically or having accession negotiations started, but putting this very problematic political demands on basically on by Bulgaria, what basically comes down to blackmailing North Macedonia on interpretation of history, putting it into a separate new negotiating chapter. I find that highly problematic because one may refer or may remind your viewers that Serbia, as a precedent, so far is the only one that has a separate chapter 35 on so-called bilateral issues, but this is on Kosovo, on the dialogue on status dispute with Kosovo. This is not really a genuinely only bilateral issue. It's a much, much bigger issue, and it's a serious one. So there was ample reason to move towards that tool of a separate negotiating chapter, while basically doing the same for something completely different in the Bulgarian case would, to me, mean to legitimize a political claim based on which Bulgaria is hijacking the EU for its relationships and its aims related to North Macedonia. So this, to me, would be really, really problematic.
MPAs of the European Parliament say Brussels is working on so-called quiet diplomacy over the dispute. What is running in the background?
Well, I have to admit, I don't know. I mean, obviously, as I said, there are negotiations going on. There have been talks. We've seen visits to Sofia, talks to the Bulgarian president. So we can only guess what is really going on. But as I said, what we know is that we have a caretaker government in Romania, in Bulgaria. It's the same that has misused the EU integration process for its own problematic claims on the one side, and on the other side, the only proposal how to solve the deadlock that has reached the public, I just talked about a minute ago, to me seems very, very problematic, and from what I understand is something that was right away rejected by representatives from North Macedonia.
Despite the fact that Portugal is chairing the Union, is it Berlin that is pushing for opening of the European door for Macedonia and Albania as soon as possible?
Well, of course, it's Berlin. I mean, we know that Berlin has been very active. Last year, during its own EU presidency, particularly State Secretary Roth from the Foreign Office has been very active, shuttle diplomacy, trying to mediate between Sofia and Skopje. But at the end, we have to recall that these German-led negotiations and efforts failed. They hit a wall. So my question is really what has changed since end of last year politically, particularly in Sofia, and I simply don't see any substantial change in Sofia. Back last year, there were a lot of assessments of people who know Bulgarian politics much better than I do that this has become the North Macedonian opening of accession talks has become the victim of upcoming elections and election campaign in Bulgaria. So if that is the case, as Bulgaria is facing another elections because of the coalition formation deadlock, again, I don't see what substantially has changed, despite obviously some ongoing quiet negotiations behind closed doors that would really feed this optimism.
What answers can be expected from the two-day visit today and tomorrow of the Portuguese President Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa to Bulgaria?
Well, again, as I said, this obviously is an attempt, and it's a very welcome attempt by the Portuguese presidency to try to negotiate, to mediate, and to achieve some progress. Particularly given that Portugal is not really one of the EU member states known for a very strong engagement on the Western Balkans and enlargement to the Western Balkans. This is very welcome, but apart from some conciliatory tone, a much better tone than we've seen end of last year when the previous German mediation attempts collapsed. I would really be surprised if the outcome of that two-day visit is any substantial breakthrough.
If Bulgaria does not step down, what solution can be realistic?
Well, I mean, let's be very clear. This performance of Bulgaria is really discrediting the EU's whole enlargement policy and its credibility, undermining its credibility in the Western Balkans. Not that there were other factors and actors within the EU undermining that credibility over the last few years already, but this is a major new step in that wrong direction. So let's be very clear on this. In case there is no breakthrough now, and probably even not for the rest of the year, I think one will simply have to, and the rest of the EU will then, and let me remind you that we have elections upcoming in Germany and the end of the Merkel area, Chancellor Merkel, who has been the driving force among member states, heads of states and governments over more than a decade on enlargement and on the Western Balkans. So I fear that if there is no breakthrough this year and the next few months, we will have to wait and appeal to to next year's situation where we probably, hopefully, have a new government in Bulgaria. That issue will not be anyone more of election campaign. The rhetoric will be tamed down on the one, and then on the other end, we will have a new incoming German government, and that one will definitely have to position itself on enlargement and come up with a new initiative on revitalizing the EU's enlargement policy to the Western Balkans in general, but particularly on some troubling issues. One of these really being this bilateral dispute between Bulgaria and North Macedonia.
Mr. Weber, my last question is: despite everything, what are the chances for a date for opening negotiations between Macedonia and EU this June?
Well, as I said already, we don't have insight into the negotiations that are going on and what this expressed optimism is based on, but judging by circumstantial evidence and the overall political situation, I would judge it very unlikely that we will see a breakthrough this year. How much I had hoped for a breakthrough already for the last 3 years, and how much I really find this really damaging and unacceptable from a point of view both of the interests of the EU, wider Europe, for the stability of the region, the stability of Europe, and from a point of view of the interests both of Bulgaria and particularly North Macedonia.